Hi, I'm Joe McDonald.
And I'm Mary Ann McDonald, and we are honored and pleased to be part of the OPTIC conference this summer. For those of you who might not know us, Joe and I are a professional wildlife photography husband and wife team, and we've been doing this now for 34 years.
Yeah, I've been doing this ever since I was a kid, basically. I started when I was around 13 and selling photographs when I was in high school and then on through college. And this is basically what I've been doing my entire life.
So today we're going to be talking about some of those photo gems, those hidden gems that might be right around the corner from you. None of us can really travel that much right now. So let's utilize or let's look for those things that we can photograph now.
Yeah, we'll be showing a little bit of what we've done in the past and some of our favorite places. And then we're going to fine tune that into this COVID world that hopefully will soon change.
So let's get started by doing our image presentation. So we're going to be talking today about photographing wildlife and nature, finding those photo gems that might be right around the corner from you. Now, as we said, we've been doing this for 34 years, and this is kind of a photo journal of what we looked like when we started and what we look like now, and some of the crazy stuff we were doing last year during the height of the COVID pandemic. We started out 34 years ago leading photo tours and workshops here in the United States. We started out in the Everglades, and even back then we were photographing, or we were getting some award-winning photos such as this.
Yeah, this shot, Mary being so tongue-tied because she's so modest.
Yeah.
This was a BBC first place winner in the Wildlife Photography Contest of the Year.
In bird behavior.
Shot with manual focus and manual exposure.
And it won in 1994, so it just shows you how long we've been doing this. Besides the Everglades, we also did photo tours and workshops in Yellowstone, and all the seasons from spring through fall and into winter. And this shot
that was the cover of my second edition of a book that was done by Photo called the Complete Guide to Wildlife Photography.
We also, for the past 30 years, have been doing hummingbird shoots, photo workshops, and tours in Arizona. And we are known for our hummingbird shots, and Joe is actually known as the master of flash. But over the past 10, 15, 20 years, we've started to travel more and more. And in fact, the last 7 years, we've been traveling for 32 weeks of the year, from places such as Svalbard, up above the Arctic Circle, north of Norway, going for polar bears, which was our main subject, but everything from king eiders to walrus. We then have been going to the Falkland Islands for almost 25 years as well. And of course, there we focused on penguins.
Yeah, the Falkland Islands are often considered like the Galapagos of the Atlantic. And unlike the Galapagos, which is a fairly crowded and very popular tourist destination, on these islands, which are privately owned, you have a chance often to be the only small group with a colony of penguins, or sometimes on the entire island. It's a wonderful place.
We've branched into Central and South America, starting first in Costa Rica, where we've, of course, went to photograph hummingbirds, but have found all sorts of other subjects there as well. We've also gone now into Ecuador, a place that we love. One of our target species there is the beautiful male cock of the rock. But once again, our main emphasis is hummingbird photography. One of our favorite places, though, in South America, one of two of our favorite places, is Brazil. There's so much stuff to photograph. There's so much behavior, such as this caiman doing the bubble dance.
Yeah, the males will arch their back like almost like a medieval dragon.
Besides some of the other animals that you can get, the tamandua, the giant anteater, the tapir, and then the Einstein monkeys, or the capuchin monkeys, who actually use a rock as a tool to open up palm nuts. And the birds, there are so many good birds in Brazil, including the hyacinth macaw and the toco toucan. And we also work a lot with diving and flying birds. But our key species, of course, is the jaguar. And this shot, I'm honored and pleased to say, was one of Joe's first place winners in the BBC Wildlife Photographer of the Year Mammal Division. And working with the compositional elements, working with the habitat, you need to show these animals in habitat or people will think you're in a zoo.
Yeah, one of the dream shots I always had was of a jaguar up on a log overlooking the river. And it took me maybe 7 years before I finally got a shot like that. And now on these trips, with them being as habituated as they are, it's a pretty common occurrence.
But I have to say, the place that is nearest and dearest to our heart is Torres del Paine, a place where Joe and I have always done our own vacations. And from Torres del Paine, you get incredible mountain sceneries, Andean condors flying overhead. But our main subject is the beautiful puma.
Yeah, and the point behind this is when you do any trip to anywhere, don't just concentrate on the target species, because you may not even get it. But if you're photographing everything from the landscape to the other wildlife to the birds, macro, etc., even if you're not successful in the animal that you're after, you would still have a really successful trip.
And even though that first image showed a rainbow, we tell people to don't chase rainbows, to take it as it comes. And once again, to always shoot the habitat shots to show these animals in the incredible environment in which they live. Joe and I have many favorite locations in the world, but one of our true favorites is India, where, of course, our target species is the tiger. And it's a place where if we had to spend any time, and especially Joe, that's where he would spend it.
Yeah, if I had 2 months to just kick around in any country, it would be in India because of the diversity that's there. It's truly like from Dorothy with the Wizard of Oz, lions and tigers and bears.
Oh my.
And wolves and a variety of primates and birds. It's really, really incredible. However, photographing tigers is not as easy as the other big cats. These are forest animals, and you have to stay on the game drive trails. So you're limited on the road, and you're looking for a cat that lives in the woods. So it is tougher, but it's really worth it when you do find those cats.
But there, as Joe said, there are so many other species in India, and it's one of those stop and smell the roses, because when you stop to do a leopard or a peacock or a green bee eater, and you hear the other animals doing the alarms, that's how you find the tigers.
And by the way, that sloth bear back there is probably the most dangerous animal, but tigers are nothing. The guides are afraid of sloth bears because they're very, very unpredictable.
We've been able to finally photograph snow leopards in the wild, which has allowed us to, in 4 different years, photograph the 7 big cats of the world. Now, we're probably most known for going to Africa because we've been going to Africa for 34 years. It's a place that's near and dear to our heart. In fact, Joe was going way back in 1985 when Kilimanjaro still had a lot of snow up in the glaciers on top of the mountain. We've been to several different countries in Africa, including Ethiopia, South Africa, Madagascar, but our love and we're known for East Africa. This was a shot that I won first place in the AGFA photo contest way back when from South Africa. And these 2 shots of Joe's, once again, placed in the BBC Wildlife Photographer of the Year competition.
Yeah, I got to say something about the lion and the buffalo. My leg was actually shaking like I was on a cliff. I was so excited, and I could remember thinking, wow, I'm still really psyched about this stuff.
But there have also been times when we've had great shots that we have lost thanks to digital that could have been award-winning shots.
Yeah, the mantra is back up, back up, back up. And I was backing up, but somehow I put a file that I had this shot, which was really one of my favorites, and somehow or other, it didn't end up in that file. And as I cleared my laptop to make room for more images, because I had everything backed up, I didn't have this backed up, and I lost all but this JPEG.
We're probably, out of all the places in East Africa, we are known the most for going to Rwanda. To date, we have done 106 treks for those beautiful gentle giants, the mountain gorilla in Rwanda. We have photographed babies, like newborn babies, and we photographed them from the time they were little till now they're silverbacks. When you're spending that much time with them, you can play, you can have different compositional freedom, you can go for tight shots, headshots, but what a thrill it is to be on the ground with these animals and photographing them. But in saying all this, you can get really inspired and get all these great shots when you travel. However, nobody's been able to basically for the last 12, 14, 15 months. So we want to take you to some places that we love around the United States, places that might be in your backyard, from wildlife refuges to actually your very backyard, to get inspired, to get out there and to find those photogens and to photograph them. starting off with Alaska. We always would go the last week of August, first week of September, when it goes from summer to fall to winter very quickly. As you can see, as the tundra is turning into the fall colors. A great place for moose, caribou, and for scenics, especially if you had a clear day without smoke, to get Denali in Wonder Lake. But even, a lot of times you can't find those big animals or the subjects you're looking for, but it's those hidden photo gems that really help make the trip, such as the tundra or a willow ptarmigan. Our love is either in the southwest or the southeast corner of Alaska, including the southwest, where we've been going for brown bears for many, many years, including coastal Katmai, where we're right on sandbars or riverbanks, photographing these bears running past us, chasing down fish. Here are just a few examples of some of their different fishing methods that they use to catch these salmon. But you're hoping for a shot like this where the bear is running straight at you, chasing down those salmon, and it looks like it's coming right at us.
Yeah, and that's where I wanted to interject, because Alaskan brown bears are technically grizzly bears. Grizzly bears are Alaskan brown bears. It's the same species. In Yellowstone and Glacier National Park, where you could also find grizzly bears, if you tried to take a shot like this, you'd probably be killed. Those bears are completely different in temperament than these bears on coastal Alaska.
At this time of year, which is in August when we go, they are concentrating on building up their fat reserves. So we're nothing to them. They want those salmon. And even though we want the big bears to catch a fish, sometimes when the mamas catch a fish, they'll give the heads to the babies to play. And this is a lot of fun to photograph as well. Now, we would like to share some of the outfitters that we use when we go up there. But before I do that, just to show you that when the high tides come in, you can't be out on the mud flats with the bears or at the river. So you might go out in a skiff to look for some of the other wildlife of Alaska, such as sea otters or eagles. Now, to share those outfitters, we have gone for 20 years plus with Chuck Keim on the Coastal Explorer 2, Katmai. So I highly recommend checking him out. He's one of the best. We've also started to go down on the Southwest Peninsula to work with another outfitter who's more internally in Katmai. We stay on Lake Iliamna and fly from there to different places. Once again, we're along rivers on the inside or interior of Katmai with the bears catching the salmon. And you can see that at that time of year, it's the reds or the Chinooks that are running. And yes, we go to Brooks Falls, and it might not be the peak in July when all sorts of stuff, but you can still get these shots.
Yeah, Katmai National Park with the Brooks Falls is a very, very famous place. But during the peak in July, it can be so crowded that you can be on the viewing platform for about an hour and may have to wait several hours to even get up there. And it's a mile walk. And after you're there, you have to turn around and go back and get in line again. Later in the year, there's not nearly as many people, and sometimes you can be there the entire time.
The person that we go to here is Jerry Jacks with Alaska Grizzly Safaris. Highly recommend him as well if you want to experience a different brown bear experience other than the coastal Katmai. Now, if you want to get whales, you go to Southeast Alaska. And we had worked for several years with outfitters out of Juneau, and we switched then down to Petersburg and work with Dennis Rogers. He is a photographer as well, and he knows how to position the boat and get you where the action is. And once again, going in August, you get the breaching, you get flipper flaps, and especially get bubble net feeding. But besides that, you get a chance to visit other locations, going ashore for some of the beautiful flowers, looking for black bear that are coming in for the dog salmon run down there, or even photographing the salmon fishermen as well. Once again, here is Dennis's information. He's Alaska Sea Adventures. Now, we're going to go from Alaska down to Arizona, and I know there are a lot of things in between California, Oregon, Washington State.
Yeah, our portfolio is kind of limited because for the last 30 years, we've been doing international travel rather than domestic travel and have only hit a few key places.
But in Arizona, around the Phoenix and Tucson area, there are some hidden gems that you may not be familiar with, such as the Gilbert Water Ranch, which is a suburb of Phoenix. This water ranch, it's a water treatment plant. And during the winter, you get great migrants there. We were there in the spring, and it's just a great place to visit morning and evening. Also in the Phoenix area, east of Phoenix, is the Boyd Thompson Arboretum. Of course, it's an arboretum. There's going to be beautiful cactus and plants, but you can also, it's a great place for birds, lizards, and other things. You just take your time, walk the trails, and look. We were just introduced while we were down in the Tucson area to the Sweetwater's water treatment plant. It's known for its family of bobcats that have become habituated to people, and we were lucky enough to have one of the young males walk right past us as we were photographing a Sora rail.
Yeah, several communities around the country are now making wetlands out of their water treatment plants. In Florida, there's several of these, and they've grown up into like wildlife refuges that are really wonderful for photography.
Some of the other places to go, we're not big zoo photographers, but the Sonoran Desert Museum is one of the best. They've got a great hummingbird aviary. They've got the small animal canyon, which is where this gray fox is. And plus, there's a lot of wild birds on the property that you can get pictures of as well. There's also some photographers who have set up places to photograph, such as Ron and Janine Nybrug with their desert
Photo retreat.
Yeah, photo retreat. And they're just north of Tucson, and you can find them on the internet, as you can Dan O'Grayson with the pond at Elephant Head. But he runs basically spring through summer into fall. You can get bat photography at night. It's a great place to visit, just as with Ron and Janine's place. Many people know about the South Texas photo ranches, but they're still worth mentioning just in passing to let you know that there are some great places to photograph, such as Laguna Seca or Santa Clara Ranch. Check it out if you're a photographer. You can go with a group, you can go with it as an individual, and you will get stunning shots.
Yeah, the nice thing about all those places is that it's kind of like plug and play. You know, they're already set up for you, and all you need to do is get there with your lens, and the birds and the wildlife is coming in. So it's very easy to get quality photographs without doing any kind of work. So what we've just shown you was our world pre-COVID. And with the restrictions we've had over the last 12, 14 months, and who knows how long it's really going to go into the future, that does not mean that we can't be photographing. So we've done a heck of a lot of stuff locally. And to give you some motivation in that regard, we're going to talk about some of our locations that we've gone to. We live near the capital of Pennsylvania, and there's this wonderful spot called Wildwood. It's a marshland. And in that marshland, there's a little trail, and along there, the subjects are used to people, which is the key to great wildlife shots. For example, the bullfrog, painted turtles, greenback herons, sometimes eagles fish there, and ospreys. And mammals that sometimes are very, very elusive out in the field in non-preserved areas can become very tame, like this mink here, and the groundhog, which in many areas is simply persecuted as some type of pest. I have a friend that's a real fox enthusiast, and every year, friends of his find dens, let him know, and I've joined him on a couple of occasions to get some wonderful shots of red fox. And this might be a great example of just networking. And networking might be via Instagram or Twitter or Facebook, where you can make some friends and perhaps share information and get to photograph things that otherwise you might not have a chance. Local swamps, in summer at least, and here we are in summer, are great areas for insects. And this dragonfly was about to land on the little stem here, and I caught it in action by a feature called Pro Capture, which is an Olympus feature we'll talk about a little bit later. As I said about networking, we made friends with some local high school and young adult birders, and in our friendship here, we've shared information, and they told me about this long-eared owl roosting spot. It's not a spectacular photograph, but without this networking going on, I never would have known about this bird. We usually are in India during March, and during that time, one of the most spectacular migrations on the East Coast occurs in Pennsylvania, where sometimes over 100,000 snow geese land in a place called Middle Creek Wildlife Refuge, where in migration, they rest for a few days before moving on. It is an incredible spectacle for both snow geese and whistling swan.
Yeah, many people know about Bosque de Apache. in New Mexico. But the East also has spots like this, but more in spring than fall.
Not very far away, there's another area called Conowingo Dam.
On the Susquehanna River.
Just south of the Pennsylvania border in Maryland, where sometimes scores of bald eagles congregate to fish below the dam. Near Ocean City, New Jersey, there's a causeway that leads to the barrier island and a visitor center there, which overlooks a wonderful colony of herons like the black crown and yellow crown, glossy ibis, little blue herons, a variety of egrets. And you're looking right into these nests or down onto them, and birds are flying in constantly. It's becoming an extremely popular and very rewarding spot. But you don't even have to travel. And often we overlook things that are right in front of us, and we just take them as mundane. Like a cottontail rabbit. We've had people at our house that, oh, that's just a rabbit. But if you make a definitive portrait of it, it can be quite an attractive shot. And chipmunks. We think of chipmunks sometimes as just pests around your bird feeder, but they can make wonderful images as well. Using that pro capture feature that I mentioned before with Olympus, let me explain how that works right now. When you press your shutter down halfway and you have pro capture as your drive mode in, with the shutter halfway, the camera records images continuously, but it doesn't write them to the card. It just has them in the camera buffer. And when you press your shutter down all the way, it records that shot, which is probably the shot that you missed because the chipmunk's already gone, and the 35 frames that preceded that, or less if you set it for less than 35 frames. So things like a squirrel that, again, could just be a portrait shot could now become an exciting action shot because you can capture them in mid-leap and birds launching off in mid-flight with this pro capture feature.
You may think this is hard to do, but last year, because of COVID and nobody could travel and we were basically in a quarantine lockdown place, we habituated our animals right here in our yard by having feeding sites where they started out with the feeding site right by the launch point and then just gradually moving it away so that they learn to jump between these spots. It's so easy to do, and you can do it in your backyard just as easily.
And the point of that is you don't just go out that day and get something done. You plan for it. And the squirrel, as Mary mentioned, was a perfect example of that. And same thing with hummingbirds. They may be coming to various feeders, but you want them to come to a particular feeder. And if you set that up and give it a few days, that's going to happen. So with our birds around our home, by putting out or having a constant feeding area, but then putting perches above the feeders, the birds invariably will land on those, maybe only for a second or two, but you'll be able to get nice portraits of the birds that don't look like they're at a feeder. And this is this very complicated yard scene here is all of our feeders that are set up, and they're on poles and pipes so that squirrels and chipmunks can't steal the seed. But when we're actually going to photograph, we remove most of them so that the birds have to come to the feeders that we are set up at, where we also have our props. And here's an example, just right off our porch. There's a little knothole in that log. I put sunflower seed in there. The chipmunks know it, and they come in and feed on the seed, and you get these wonderful portraits of the chipmunks as they're sticking out of a hole. Also, just a few feet away from that is a semi-permanent bird feeding setup we have. I change the props constantly. I have a drilled hole in the log so I can slip them into a pipe, if you will. And from there, then, we're getting a variety of different birds, white-breasted and red-breasted nuthatches. And by changing the props that are on either side of the feeders, we get very natural-looking shots. But right below that is a cup with birdseed in it.
And one of the key things with all of these woodpeckers and birds that like suet is Joe actually drilled holes into these wooden limbs or parts of limbs and trunks so that he would stuff the suet into that so the birds would come to the wood instead of to suet holders. What we wanted to show here is thinking about your background and how you want to shoot for things.
Yeah, and because I'm shooting right from my porch, I can change my backgrounds by simply my angles of view or where I put my logs. So you're not really pigeonholed into one position as you might be if you would go to a park or a reserve where there might be a photo blind set up and you can't change anything. On your own property or a place that you might visit frequently, you might be able to make changes that are inducive for exactly what you want to photograph. Here's some raccoons, a nocturnal animal that I set up a multiple flash setup to get these raccoons as they were visiting this water hole. And I could shoot it right at water level at times in any position I wanted to, because this water hole that you see here that looks like a nice pond in the middle of a forest is actually a fake water hole that I built that is about waist height. So if I'm sitting on a chair, I can be shooting right over the lip of the pond and getting these eye level views. And then or water level views. And then what I'll do is set up flashes around this to give me the lighting that I want, because the raccoons are coming in at night. If you have some property, whether it's for raccoons or deer or birds, you can do a setup. And it doesn't have to be big.
And we always say, if you build it, they will come. And even a small water set can be built right on your porch or right in your backyard. Birds will come in to take baths and things. It's a great way to get shots that you might not necessarily get.
Yeah, if you live in an area where there isn't any water and you provide water, you will get birds and probably other animals as well.
Now, starting January 1st of this year, Joe had kind of didn't know what he wanted to do with the shot. So I gave him the challenge of taking one shot, at least one shot a day, and posting it. I wanted him to feel his creative juices flowing. I wanted to get him out there and shooting in all types of weather and all sorts of conditions.
She wanted me out of the house is what she really wanted.
Well, that was maybe part of it too.
But this photo challenge that Mary's describing here, I really wish that everyone would do something similar, because it really pushed my creative juices, as you'll see as I progress through the year, up to the point that we are right now, which is about half of the year, or almost half of the year has gone by. So it started on January 1st, just on my backyard or my front porch with one of those logs. And you can see there that the suet is visible. I wasn't as sophisticated as I would soon be as I'm doing this photo challenge. On January 4th, we had a snowstorm. So on that day, it was kind of a no-brainer to just take a landscape of the forest. And then January 6th or so, I still wasn't sure if I was really going to be getting into this. I didn't spend much time, and then I just walked outside and found some squirrel tracks in fresh snow and took a shot. So early on, it was a real challenge that I wasn't sure I was really up to.
He had to be thinking on what he wanted to take a picture of.
And this shot kind of shows the beginning of the evolution here. Because again, in midwinter, in January in Pennsylvania, unless you're going to shoot birds every day, subjects can be kind of
far and few between.
Few and far between is the
Yes.
word. And I found some blue jay feathers that I arranged into some type of little abstract, if you will. And it began to have me thinking about, well, I don't have to just shoot everything literally. I can be expanding my horizons, which the photo challenge ultimately does. One day we drove about 90 miles to try to photograph short-eared owls, and we didn't see a one. It was towards the end of the day, so I took this very lame, like whatever you'd call it, plant shot of the
grass shots in the snow.
So I had my shot of the day. But as we were going home, we passed by our state capitol, which we have done thousands and thousands of times and never photographed it before. And Mary said, "There's your shot of the day." So we stopped and I did a time exposure, a very short time exposure of the city lights of our capitol. Again, something I've never did before, but the challenge made me do it. Photographing right from my porch, or you photographing at an area that is easily accessible to you, gives you the chance to try different things. Photographing from my porch, I often, or at least I started, by using a photo blind. And this one is called a chair blind.
And you can find this at Walmart or Cabela's. It's easy to find.
And you sit in the blind, and then you just simply pull the cover over the top. The lens goes through there. And then with that, birds that might be skittish and that are not accustomed to you you'll be able to photograph them.
But before you get in it, put the blind out for several days so they're used to seeing the blind there. And then you go in it after that.
After a bit, because I was feeding these birds every day, sometimes several times a day, they associated me with food. So instead of having to use the blind, I could simply be sitting out there. Mary could be serving me lunch.
And hot drinks.
And I could be getting shots like this as a cardinal launches itself to come into the bird feeders. Now, photographing from a easily accessible spot like my porch, or perhaps a local woodland area near you, or some spot that you can visit often, gives you the chance to be creative and try things new. So I have my camera set up with a hot shoe flash, and I'm photographing a red-breasted nuthatch with a little bit of fill flash here. Pretty easy shot to do. And then after I got this, what can I do differently? Let's push the envelope on a different day. And I used multiple electronic flashes, maybe 3 of them here, 2 in the front and a strong backlight. And instead of using a natural background, I put up a poster and have the flash illuminating that as well. So it gave me a whole different look. And then on another day, I used a range IR, an infrared triggering device, to catch birds as they were flying in, and then the electronic flash froze the action.
There are some people that we've talked to who actually use their house as a blind, and they'll set things up outside of a window, a bathroom window or a kitchen window, and shoot out through the window as they're blind. It can work anywhere for you.
Yeah. And if you're going to do that, if you can, open the window. Some people shoot through the glass.
And you get reflections.
Well, you may not, but you're certainly going to degrade the quality of it a little bit. This chickadee here looks like it's right on a cliff edge or on the forest floor. Well, it's actually on a little set that I have mounted on a pedestal in our yard. And the ultimate result, though, is an illusion. And that's what you're doing when you're putting up a prop by a bird feeder, or like what I'm doing right here. With this photo challenge, as I got into it, I really thought then, okay, I am going to get a shot a day. I'm not going to give up. And some days, there didn't seem to be very much around. I was at that place called Middle Creek I was talking about earlier. Middle Creek, right? Wildwood. And at Wildwood, I found this feather. It's something I probably never would have shot otherwise, but now, okay, I got my shot of the day. But then luckily, later on, I found something that I was really excited about, and that was a muskrat. And again, striving to get a better shot for the day made the image. A friend of mine has a nice property that was on a flyway for eagles and hawks, and I set up this blind using bamboo and camouflage netting that you get in an Army Navy store or buy from Cabela's. It's made from bamboo that I lashed together. By the way, Mary Ann?
One of the worst things I've ever planted in my garden was bamboo, and now we cannot get rid of it.
Yeah, so it makes for a good blind material. And then with this, being inside this blind, sometimes for 5 or even 7 hours straight, I've gotten some wonderful shots of birds of prey as they're flying by or flying in or perching, like the bald eagle you just saw, or the red-tailed hawks here, or an immature bald eagle that perched on a branch that was within range of my lens. And there were some days when I'd be in that blind and I'd get nothing. Nothing really came in. And I might go and end up shooting a woodpecker at our feeder or something for the day's shoot. But most of the days were pretty rewarding. Now, I mentioned earlier about
Middle Creek.
This location, and there's another one up in northern, the coast of Washington. I'm blanking on the name right now.
But there's also down on the Delmarva Peninsula. There's lots of places like this during spring migration where the snow geese and the swans will gather before heading north.
And again, having this challenge gave me the motivation to finally say, hey, we got the time. Let's go down there and photograph those tundra swans and those snow geese that we've always wanted to do and never took the time to do. Mary's brother lives down in Northern Virginia, and there's an area down there called Huntley Meadows. And this winter, there were otter that people were taking pictures of, sometimes with cell phones only a few feet away. So we made a special trip down to Huntley Meadows. We didn't see the otters, but we had hooded mergansers and Canada geese. Seen some wonderful photographs from that location. And again, around home again, with the opportunities that you have. Sometimes I'll only be out for a half hour, but during that time I get the magic shot I want and I can get back to work to do whatever.
We were heading to visit some of the state parks in Pennsylvania. Once the restrictions are lifted for travel and everything, we decided to start checking out some of our state parks, which we had never had the time to do. And on the way to one of these parks, we found this beautiful red fox walking down the middle of the road, which then went and just sat at the side of the road while we could photograph outside or out of the window with our lenses that had been on our lap.
Yeah, we're using these Olympus Micro Four Thirds cameras now. And with a 300 millimeter in our lap, it's the equivalent of 600 millimeters. So it was really quite easy to open up the window and hand hold the smaller lens to get a shot of that red fox, as we've done with some other things as well. We had a red squirrel that began coming in, and I saw something that just, I never read anything about or whatever, but if you look carefully there, you can see it has like a kind of like a vestigial thumb, and it uses those pads there to hold seeds that they're then eating. I've never read anything about that. I've never heard anything about that, but here I had a shot that actually depicts that going on. And as a biology, as a zoology enthusiast, this was exciting to me. When we're doing these postings, when we do them on Facebook and sometimes on Instagram, I usually do a write-up on it as well, and explaining something like this. This is a zebra-tailed lizard. It's named for the black and white tail. And when it's disturbed, it will put its tail up over its back so that if a predator goes to grab at it, it will probably grab the tail, which then breaks off and wiggles like mad as the lizard then scurries off with the predator's attention to this wiggly thing in its talons or in its beak. Now, for this challenge for myself, it was one shot a day. And you may, because of work or family demands or whatever, not have the time to shoot one shot a day, but you could do maybe one shot per weekend or 5 shots per weekend and still do what I'm doing here in challenging myself, like with the spring peeper, where not only just the shot of the peeper, but then the peeper in its breeding with blowing out its vocal sac and giving a long trill. Some of the shots too, you don't just go out necessarily and get the shot right off the bat. Some of these things take some planning. For example,
for this woodcock, we knew it was time for the woodcock mating display. So we went up to a local field where we knew they did this and watched them for 2 or 3 nights before setting this up. So we knew the exact spot or the exact, basic location where they launched to do their flight.
Yeah, so what I did here is I set up 5 flashes covering the area where I thought the woodcock would be staging from before they did their flight. And I went into my blind, the chair blind, and because the Olympus camera has something called
silent mode,
and also has a live boost where it enhances live view boost where it enhances the image, I could see what I was looking at even as it got darker and darker. In spring, when this challenge really got into gear, spotted salamanders were breeding, and they were coming down to vernal ponds, where I was able to get photographs of these salamanders as they were coming in to breed, and red-spotted newts and frogs and the birds that were coming in as well. So again, with the challenge, I had a reason to be out there trying to photograph. Back in the day, I think I was always guilty of just doing these like frame-filling portraits. And I think because of the challenge, my perspective has broadened. And now I'm really looking for shots where I have animal or plant in habitat. And for that, I'm often using a wide-angle zoom lens, the equivalent of like a 14 to a 28 millimeter. And with that, then, I'm not only getting the subject, I'm getting the habitat, and I think a real sense of place. We use Olympus, and it has a very nice articulating screen that goes in several different directions.
A flip-out screen.
But I would really recommend that if you buy another camera, that you get one that has a great flip-out screen that would make it easy to view from any position. Because with that, then, you can be doing especially ground level work where you can lay the camera down right on the ground or on the shoreline or on a beanbag on the ground. A position like this, I'm squatting, I'm looking down on the viewfinder.
And he's saving his back, because at this point in our lives, we need to save our backs.
So it's a great accessory. For this was in one of our vernal ponds. And again, it kind of illustrates that some of these shots for our week-long or
our challenge,
our daily challenge, didn't just occur overnight. I had baited these wood ducks in at our pond for several weeks. Then I put a blind there, and then I ended up with 2 cinder blocks with a piece of wood over the top, and I could lay the beanbag on the wood and shoot at inside of a blind for some really effective and intimate views of the wood ducks.
Now, this shot is interesting because we were going on our first trip in 14 months to Arizona. And because I was so out of practice, we were packing at 2 a.m., 2:30 in the morning. And Joe decided to...
I knew that the next day would be involved with travel. So at 12:01 of the next day of our challenge, we had a full moon. I put my 150 to 400 with a 2x converter on it. So this is an uncropped shot at 2,000 millimeters of the moon. So it fulfilled my shot of the day.
And he didn't have to worry when we got into Tucson very late at night.
Yes. And then we started our vacation trip, if you will. And this was one from
Sweetwaters.
Sweetwaters? Gilbert Ranch.
Oh, I'm sorry, Gilbert Water Ranch.
Yeah, right off a boardwalk of Elise Bitter, and I was really excited about getting this. And then, as Mary said before, down at Sweetwater in Tucson, we were lucky enough to get this bobcat walking right by us. There's several places in Florida, too, that have habituated bobcats. And so, there's locations like that around the country. We went up looking for this species of rattlesnake called a twin-spotted rattlesnake. Couldn't find it. And as we were driving down from the mountains where these are located, we stopped to look for a woodpecker. And I was backing up to get a better view of the woodpecker, stopped, and got out of the car instead. And just as I did so, this twin-spotted rattlesnake was right behind my tire. I would have run it over if I had gone any farther. So I crawled off the road, went into this little patch here, and I was able to get shots of the snake that we looked for over 2 hours. We continued on to Oklahoma.
And this just shows how visiting different wildlife refuges around the country. This is from Wichita Mountains Wildlife Refuge. And it's a great place to photograph, as are many of the wildlife refuges around the country.
But we had target-rich environments, and we had targets like the prairie dog here giving an alarm whistle, and then continuing on to Arkansas, where we were hoping to go through this National Wildlife Refuge, which was almost completely flooded. We did get one of the species we were after, and that was the prothonotary warbler, one of the prettiest warblers, and it's generally found in swamps. And then besides the wildlife, as opportunities arose, we also photographed
cactus blooms
and kind of agave, what would you call that?
Leaves, I guess.
Yeah, and basically just a part representing a whole. But one of the things that I try to do on any trip is use every single lens that I brought with me. And again, thankfully, or thanks to the photo challenge, instead of just shooting a traditional shot of a mayapple flower, well, the last one certainly showed a different view, but here's the mayapple flower as well, with the 7 to 14 millimeter, equivalent of 14 millimeter, to not only show the flower, but also the plant and the forest as well, giving it a sense of place. When we were in Oklahoma, although we did another shot for the shot of the day, I also played with just experimentation. We used slow shutter speeds here
We
And-
had a tremendous wind. So we had these gorgeous beds of wildflowers, but we couldn't shoot them just as wildflowers because of the wind. So we experimented with different shutter speed.
And here's another example. This was from White Sands, New Mexico, as we were traveling across. And what you're seeing there, although it could be sea turtle tracks or crab tracks, these are little beetles, darkling beetles that were going across the white sand. And it makes for a kind of an interesting pattern. And then one evening when I came home, I was trying to photograph our raccoons, but they never came in. But with the lights that I was using to illuminate the set, insects were flying all about. So I used a feature of Olympus called Live Composite, which records light that did not previously exist on the sensor without overexposing what's already there. So I created this insect trail at night, which was kind of reflective of the sand trail that I did earlier.
And what was your inspiration?
My inspiration
was Jackson Pollock.
Ah, yes. This was my Jackson Pollock. Throw
paint on a canvas and see what you end up getting.
And throw bugs on the sensor and see what you get. Another feature that Olympus has that we just love is this thing which we talked about earlier called Pro Capture. So knowing that these horned larks might take off or fly, I had that on, and it turned out that they ended up having a little spat, and I was able to record that basically after the fact, because when I shot it, it was already done. Here's where it really shined for me. I'm using that flip out screen, so I'm laying my camera flat against the mud in front of this wood frog. Wood frogs, when they call, unlike some frogs that give this long trill, these guys go like whack, whack, like that.
It sounds like chickens calling.
Ducks.
Sure, ducks.
And it happens so quickly and generally without any kind of warning that this happens and it's gone before you can respond. But having that ready with Pro Capture, as soon as I saw that happen, I fired. The shot I recorded, it was already finished, but Pro Capture captured that. It is an absolute game changer for wildlife. Another example, Gila woodpeckers on our trip in Arizona. And they were often flying into these saguaro flowers, but sometimes they'd have little spats when they did so. So turning on Pro Capture as my drive mode, I was able to get several different series of these guys fighting in the air or rolling down a cactus. And I wouldn't have been able to do that with any other system. Another feature that Olympus has, and this did not require software, was focus stacking, where instead of just shooting a flower with a blurred background, I was able to get both the hepatica flower and the background in focus, or very close to being completely in focus, to again give it that sense of place. Now, often when we're shooting macro, we're using great depth of field. But if you close your aperture down to, say, f/22, you're going to have the background appearing. It may not be sharp, but it can be a distraction. By using 2.8 and using focus stacking or focus bracketing in the Olympus camera, I was able to roll basically my focus across that whole egg case of a praying mantis at 2.8. The camera stacked it together so I have edge-to-edge sharpness on the egg mass, but the background, because the whole image was shot at 2.8, is still a complete blur. And then in our vernal ponds where I photographed the wood frogs and the wood ducks, the wood frogs and salamanders lay their eggs there, and then I collected a couple of these in a mini aquarium to photograph a wood frog tadpole and a spotted salamander larvae. And then these guys, which are called copepods, are literally the size of a pin head. And again, in a little mini tank and using electronic flashes to give me sharpness and some speed. And this is the setup for that.
Now, we didn't want to get too technical with this talk. I mean, you may not have all the toys that Joe does to do some of this, but we have a bunch of how-to videos for sale on our eJunkie site. But
How-to books.
How-to books, ebooks. But also on our YouTube channel, we have some how-to videos and how to use some of these features and what to do. So if you're interested in any of this and you want to improve your photography, check out these sites. And we hope today, as you've listened to our presentation, we have inspired you to go out and do a challenge like we have, to look for things that you can't see, to hopefully improve and excel with your photography as well. We'd like to thank B&H Photo for inviting us to participate today, and also their co-sponsor, Seagram Expeditions, for having this conference. And thank you for watching our presentation.
Thank you.